Here is the thing about Jigglypuff. She is really good in Melee, arguably one of the most unique and sometimes equally annoying characters to fight against in the entire game. She's one of the few characters with the most unconventional playstyle, and Puff is one of the best characters at edge guarding due to her aerial mobility that is overall really amazing. She's essentially a glass cannon to the extreme. It's pretty clear to see why Puff is a top 3 character right now, thanks to a lot of people like Hungrybox pretty much single-handedly being the reason why Puff remained as relevant as she is today. There are plenty of other Puff mains, but HITBOX was the one who was most consistently going to top 8s and winning major tournaments in the late 2010s. Now I know this sounds crazy, but this is the part where we go back and look and see where the character placed early in the meta, and believe it or not, Puff wasn't even top 5, not even top 10, not even top 15. Jigglypuff was 17th out of 26 on Melee's very first tier list, right next to Ness, which yeah, she was definitely underrated. Many didn't see the capabilities of her aerial mobility and overall ability to camp and KO as well, as other aspects to the character would be uncovered later on as the meta were to develop. She quickly made a name for herself in 2008 as people like even Mango were performing very well at tournaments with the character. As the years went by, Puff would rise significantly in the meta. I could go more in depth about HITBOX's rise with Puff, as ironically in the early to mid 2010s before HITBOX's reign, people thought Puff was figured out as HITBOX was kind of barely holding on to his god status at the time and had pretty middling results compared to where he would reach at the end of the decade where he looked like a monster. But that could be its own video. TLDR, Puff started out as a perceived low tier character, and she is now considered one of the best characters in the game and is possibly one of the most controversial characters in Melee. While most people don't feel this way, there is a small, vocal minority of players who actually think Puff should be banned or even be the only character in the game that should have a ledge grab limit. Because of Puff's amazing aerial mobility, she is one of the best characters at straight up running away in the air and when trying to play defensively. Melee tends to be a very aggressive game, so when players slow down, especially when someone wins a tournament by playing rather defensively, this usually causes Twitter threads of Puff rants to spawn overnight. Don't get me wrong, there are some absolutely terrible matchups for characters who have to play against Puff. Ice Climbers, the post-wobbling ban, Peach, many low-tier characters have trouble contending with her aerial speed and ability to camp them. Despite these concerns, there aren't many players who have been single-handedly gotten away with just camping with Puff, as Puff tends to lose against characters who are faster than her and that can KO her rather easily, aka Fox, who is the most common counter pick against Puff, as Fox has plenty of his own defensive tools and he can actually sort of contend with Puff and Puff's defensive play. So meta controversies aside, what does Puff actually do? Puff is actually not a very fast character on the ground. Her overall ground speed is on par with Zelda. When she's in the air, she has amazing aerial mobility. It's the complete opposite of what her ground mobility is, and this aerial mobility completely defines her moveset. Her aerial attacks are incredibly strong in combination with this. Nair, Fair, and Dare are all neutral tools that can start confirms and conversions for Puff. And then there's her most well-known aerial, her back air. BAIR is heavily disjointed and useful on stage and off stage for even edge guarding and comboing. The aerial alone coined the term Wall of Pain, which is basically where you spam a barrage of back airs until the opponent can't return off stage. This move alone is really good. It just straight up beats a lot of approaches. I mean, just look at this hitbox, look at it. Whew. Her tilts are great. Up tilt is more specifically the move that most commonly can link into rest. Forward tilt and down tilt are Puff's poking tools. Her throws are rather average aside from her up throw, which can link into rest really well depending on the matchup. Her smash attacks, while also not the best, they do have some utility. Forward smash is most commonly known as the strongest smash attack that she has, as it's actually surprisingly really good. Her special moves are either really niche or ridiculously strong. While her up B recovery isn't a recovery tool, it can actually put opponents to sleep, but because it lacks range and it leaves Puff vulnerable when missed, it's not really used a lot. Neutral B being rollout is a semi-gimmicky move. It can be used as a recovery tool, but it's overall really easy to punish. One of her better special moves being her side B pound. This move is a great recovery tool and even a great tool for edge guarding or putting characters off stage because it just hits at a really strange angle. It can be hard to contend with when Puff is throwing this move out. It's really powerful. It has a long-lasting hitbox. It even does a lot of shield damage for some reason. This move is also used a lot off stage as Puff is trying to run away or play defensively. She can use this move to sort of stall a little bit. And of course, there's her down B, rest. If missed, this move leaves Puff in a vulnerable state. It's really easy to punish if she misses a rest, but if you confirm with the tiny hitbox that's basically inside of Puff, it's one of the most defining moves in her kit, and it pretty much makes Jigglypuff who she is. It can KO as early as 25% depending on the stage and the character. It's one of the most feared moves in the game, as Hungrybox defined this as his comeback mechanic, and what can I say, this move is just really good. Jigglypuff started out as a criminally underrated character in Melee, and then became an absolute beast. Despite being a really strong character now, she does have weaknesses like stated before, her ease of being KO'd being one of them. She usually doesn't like playing on smaller stages, unless she prefers KOing early in turn of being KO'd early herself. Her neutral game is considered lackluster as she is really slow on the ground, and mostly forced to just approach with her aerials. Also, if her shield is bursted, she is one of the only characters in the game who will straight up lose a stock for this. Yes, this can actually happen. If characters take advantage of her lack of control outside of her range, it can also make it very dangerous for Puff. But she is still a really good character despite these weaknesses, and she's not a character to underestimate at all. During the transition to Project M, a character is either going to be changed significantly in order to try to give them a different moveset, maybe to make the character more unique, or to heavily change them in some way and change their existing moveset for the better and give the character quality of life changes. Good examples of this are characters like Marth, Captain Falcon, or Peach. They received quality of life changes compared to the Melee versions in order to give them slight edge in this new meta. Jigglypuff on paper is the same as Puff from Melee. However, Jigglypuff didn't receive many changes beyond that, which is in a way doesn't necessarily feel like a bad thing. She is top 3 in Melee, right? So maybe she still has a chance. Many people would think she could maintain her competitive viability from Melee and PM, when in actuality that isn't really the case. In earlier Project M tier lists, Puff was considerably placing lower than people would expect, as many people considered her to be still a good character, but she was still a mid to low tier character in Project M. In the most recent tier list for Project Plus, she ranked as the very worst character in the game. Why is that? A lot of mid to low tier characters in Melee are revamped in Project M. The cast is so close viability wise that Puff mains are going to have to learn tons of new matchups. Think of characters like Donkey Kong or Mario or just any other character that was considered mid in Melee and now they're just crazy good in Project M. Puff does better relatively when there's less characters to play against and characters especially with poor mobility. But those same characters that used to lose against her in Melee all have tools to deal with her now, and they all place higher than Jigglypuff. Puff didn't really get nerfed in any specific way. She did get tiny buffs to even her weight in Project Plus. However, this isn't enough to change her viability that much. You would think Puff would benefit from a lot of new PM tech, like B reversing. However, there are many more characters that are going to benefit from the changes a lot more. More characters have more consistent special moves, while Puff still has some rather lackluster special moves that return from Melee. Many other characters have better projectiles and can combo floaty characters relatively easily, which greatly affects the Puff matchup. Even Hungrybox himself played Puff during his reign in Melee during 2016. However, even at this point, Puff's viability never really progressed beyond that, as even after HITBOX stopped playing PM, there weren't a lot of top Puff mains going to top 8s or even grand finals of large PM tournaments. Puff is relatively uncommon even in Project Plus. Another large negative is the fact that she is arguably outclassed by a much higher tiered character, and that character is Wario. Wario is essentially the Puff character archetype but way stronger, and this has been shown by his overall meta placement and the fact that both characters have similar playstyles. Wario has a down B, essentially a super move in a sense, similar to Puff's rest. However, it's much easier to hit, can be used as a recovery tool, and it doesn't put Wario in a bad position when missed. Even though it requires more time to charge, its utility is incredible. Wario is rather floaty, but unlike Puff, Wario is heavy for this type of character archetype, meaning Wario is going to be lasting longer than Puff on average per stock. Wario has stronger overall aerials, special moves are also more consistent throughout his moveset, and you could say Wario is just a more idealized version of Puff in PM. So if you like Puff in Melee, maybe try out Wario because he's actually a pretty insane character. In Project Plus, they allowed Puff Sing to put opponents to sleep a lot longer, and they gave her Brawl Dacus and a small change to her dash attack, which is actually pretty decent changes. However, these small things aren't really enough to change the character's overall viability. Many people feel like Puff's placement in the meta right now is fine, because if they were to buff Puff, some people would think this could drastically make Puff a way more toxic character in the meta. People fear that if you buffed Jigglypuff, you could drastically change the community outlook on the character for the worse, because if you add too many buffs to this type of character archetype, you could make a really dangerous character to the community. Some people think the exact opposite, and they think Puff is relatively irrelevant and deserves a second chance. Honestly, depends on your opinion and your outlook on the character. I will leave it up to you guys to truly decide though. Alright guys, thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. There's a Patreon down below if you guys would like to join the Discord and get videos early. Thank you to all my patrons. Thank you guys. Peace out.